So let us look at one of his very popular stories, Professor Shonku and the UFO, which is being prescribed in your syllabus. Okay, now this story is told or it is narrated in the form of diary entries. Okay, and the Professor Trilokeshwar Shonku, he keeps a diary. He's a man who writes diary, who records the events in his life regularly. And he has even named that diary. It is called the Diary of a Space Traveler. And in all these stories, we find that all the important events that happened, all his thoughts, his queries, his doubts, his findings, everything find a place in his diary entries. And that is how this story also progresses. Okay, we'll move on to the story now. The story is titled Professor Shonku and the UFO. Now, the story begins on the 12th of September. The year is not mentioned. Okay, it is maybe during the early 1960s. Okay, the story begins by addressing the global UFO scenario of the present times. Now, what is this UFO? UFO means unidentified flying object. Now, it is defined as an unidentified flying object, which is a mysterious flying object in the sky that cannot be explained by the person who sees it. And some people think that UFOs are alien spaceships. And we have often heard that for thousands of years, people have reported seeing strange lights and objects flying through the sky. And today, these unexplained phenomena are commonly called as UFOs. Now, earlier it was also called as flying saucers. And the US government has records of thousands of UFO sightings. And these include photos of UFOs and interviews with people who claim to have seen them. And especially during the 1950s, many scientists have repeatedly claimed that they have seen hundreds of sightings of UFOs, and most of them they said that they look like disc-shaped objects, colored balls of light, glowing wheels. So many descriptions were given by scientists. So there was a boom in the scientific world during the 1950s. So this story also takes into account such a scenario, the UFO scenario. Okay. So, from the story, we come to know that such a UFO was spotted on the 2nd of September in the two major cities of Sweden and Russia. Okay. And our Professor Shonku has also spent a lot of time in exploring and researching about these UFOs. He has even a decade ago, he had tried to establish contact with alien civilization via radio signal, and he was even successful in his venture. But then we come to know that he stopped the research midway. Now, the reason for that was that Professor Shonku he found out that another scientist, Rodolfo Carboni, he's an Italian, he's a Milan-based physicist. He was also doing the same research. This Professor Shonku had met Carboni in an international conference that was held at Geneva. And the topic that was discussed in that conference was how to establish contact with extraterrestrial civilization. And Professor Shonku published a paper there about the subject and about his experience in the field. And many of the scientists who were present there, they really appreciated his work. And it is in that conference that Shonku met Rodolfo Carboni. And Carboni showed Shonku his paper. And when he quickly went through it, he found that both of them were doing research on the same topic. Even their titles were identical. So Carboni said that because we are researching on the same topic and because our papers are identical, our research papers are identical, Carboni decided not to present his paper because others might think that he had plagiarized or he had copied Shonku's findings and so on. So Carboni says that I am not going to present my paper. Anyway, it is somewhat the same. And Professor Shonku felt very sorry about that. So that is the reason why he stopped his research midway. He thought that let Carboni continue with his research. Anyway, I'm not going to move on with it. So that is the reason what he states. That he states why he stopped his research midway. The story then takes us to another important day in the life of Shonku, that is on 17th September, another diary entry. And he says that he met or he visited one of his friend, and his friend's name, another important character in our story, he is Mr. Nakur Chandra Bishwas. Now this was a very extraordinary man, Nagur Chandra Bishwas. He had some extraordinary psychic powers. And he lives in a place called Makorda, 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 and he used to visit this Shonku every 3 months. And about Nagur Chandra Vishwas, he possessed this unusual power of reading minds, and he was clairvoyant. Now, what do you mean by clairvoyant? Clairvoyant means it is a person who have that supernatural talent, supernatural ability to perceive events in the future, who can foresee the future that normal people cannot, that ordinary people cannot. Okay, such a person is called clairvoyant, and that skill, that capability is called clairvoyance. So, Mr. Bishwas, he can read minds, he is clairvoyant, and he also conducts past life regression. That means he can travel back to the past. Okay, and then he has the power to power of fortune telling, to foresee the future. So he's not an ordinary man. He possesses all these psychic powers. And another very important skill of Mr. Bishwas was that he had that capacity to imagine a situation or events and can also make others feel the same. That means he can imagine situations, okay, and he can also make others feel the same. That means, for example, if he imagines that it is raining, actually it will not be raining, but he can imagine that it is raining, and he can also make the others feel the same. He can imagine that he is drenched in the sea, and he can also make others feel the same. He can imagine that he has traveled back to an ancient time, an ancient era, and he can also make others feel that they are also in some antiquity, in some old or ancient time. So that was this extraordinary mental capacity of this character named Nakur Chandra Bishwas. Okay, now so our Professor Shonku, he was meeting this Bishwas, and Shonku, he showed the pictures of the UFO that he has seen in the newspaper. And to his surprise, Nakur Chandra Bishwas, he suddenly recognized it. And he says that I have seen this UFO in a vision a few days ago. ഓക്കെ. സ്വപ്നത്തിൽ കുറച്ച് ദിവസം മുമ്പ് ഞാൻ ഈ യുഫോയെ കണ്ടു എന്ന് നകുർചന്ദ്ര ബിശ്വാസ് ആരോട് പറയാണ്? പ്രൊഫസർ ഷോങ്കുവിനോട് പറയാണ്. ഓക്കെ, ഹി ഹാഡ് സീൻ ദിസ് വെരി സെയിം യുഫോ, ദിസ് അൺഐഡൻറ്റിഫയബിൾ flying object. I have seen this a few days ago. So this is an important event that Professor Shonku records in his diary in or on 17th September. Now next we move on to another important day in the life of Professor Shonku, that is recordedly on 25th September, and he happens to hear a terrible piece of news, and that has completely distracted the mind of Professor Shonku, and he even lost his interest in researching on UFO. And what was that terrible news? And the terrible news is that the Parthenon is one of the best instances of Greek civilization. It has been destroyed. Okay, the Parthenon was a temple dedicated to the Greek goddess Athena, and it was built by ancient Greek sculptors and architects like Ictinus, Callicratus, and Phidias. All these are ancient sculptors and architects. They are the ones who built this Parthenon, which is a temple of the Greek goddess Athena. So I have given a picture of the Parthenon in the background. So that is the image of that real Parthenon. You can see it. That really exists. That's a real building, a real structure, an ancient structure. Okay, so the Parthenon has been destroyed. That was the terrible news that Professor Shonku heard. And so the news was spreading like wildfire all over the world, and everybody was left in despair. The whole world was shocked to hear that. And it is reported that the incident took place at midnight, and the Athenians, the people of Athens, the Athenians, they woke up when they heard a loud explosion at midnight, and so everybody rushed out of their homes. And when somebody got there, they found that the Parthenon was gone. The Parthenon was now crumbled, and it was destroyed, and it was just now millions of fragments, dust that was strewn all over the place. So the media was having so many speculations, like whether it was some sort of powerful terrorist attack, or it was some other explosion. So many speculations were given, but nobody knew actually what happened. So anyway, a historical monument, the Parthenon, that was destroyed. That was the terrible news that Professor Shonku discusses, or that he mentions in his diary. So the next day that is recorded is 27th September, and on that day Professor Shonku receives a letter from his German friend. His friend's name is Wilhelm Kroll. Okay, so he is yet another important character in our story. Wilhelm Kroll, the German friend of Professor Shonku. Now he sent Professor Shonku a letter, and after reading this letter, the interest regarding the UFO was rekindled in the mind of Professor Shonku. Now this Wilhelm Kroll, he is touring China on some official purpose, and the main purpose of his expedition was to visit the ancient Buddhist temples, and to tour around the Xinjiang province of China and study about the archaeological relics and everything. So he was touring in China along with a team. And he says that in this letter, he says that Kroll says that during his expedition he saw a UFO twice in the sky, and he requests Professor Shonku to restart his research and investigation on the UFO. And Kroll says that the Chinese government had promised to provide them with helicopters. They will be giving them any support or any sort of aid for funding, to conduct the research on UFO. So, Kroll wishes that Professor Shonku, along with another of their friend named Jeremy Saunders, so who is also a scientist. So, Kroll is requesting Shonku and Saunders to join him to find the UFO, or to do some research on the UFO. So, this is the content of that letter. He was he was requesting Professor Shonku to accompany him to do research on the UFO. So, in the diary entry dated 1st October, we come to know that Professor Shonku has accepted the invitation, and not only that, Jeremy Saunders has also accompanied to agreed to accompany them, and even Shonku and Saunders will also again be accompanied by Nagur Chandra Babu. Nakur Chandra Bishwas. He is very fondly called as Nakur Babu by Shonku. Okay, so he will also be accompanying the team to find or to research on the UFO. So we have a team ready for conducting the research, and the investigation team consists of Professor Shonku, Nakur Chandra Bishwas, Professor Wilhelm Kroll, Jeremy Saunders, and in China they will be accompanied by Dr. Sheng, and he's an an archaeologist, a Chinese archaeologist, and he is very well aware of all those historical places and everything, archaeological spots and everything. So he will also be accompanying the team. So this is the team investigations team set for the expedition on the UFO. So the next important thing that we see in the story is happens on 9th October, and 9th October by 9th October they all have reached China, and they are now in a place called Khotan in China, and Professor Shonku happens to come across two pieces of information that Saunders shares with him. Now, after hearing that information, he was so depressed, he was so shocked, he has lost all the excitement for coming to China and everything. Now, what is that information that has deeply depressed Shonku? Let's see. Now, the information is this: two of the most well known symbols of human civilization had been demolished. And which are the two important constructs? The Eiffel Tower in Paris and the Angkor Wat in Cambodia. I'll be putting pictures of these two monuments so that you will be able to know. I think you might have learned all these things in your history classes during your school days, but still. Okay, so this is the information that deeply shocked Shonku. The Eiffel Tower and Angkor Wat, these two monuments had been destroyed again. So earlier we saw that the Parthenon had been destroyed. Now two important historical wonders, they also have been destroyed: the Eiffel Tower and the Angkor Wat. And from the news available, we come to know that the Eiffel Tower was destroyed at midnight. Okay, and investigations state that the tower was snapped during the due to the use of some extraordinary powerful rays on it. So some powerful rays was um, uh, blown onto that monument, that Eiffel Tower, and it was snapped. It was destroyed. Okay, and Angkor Wat, it was also destroyed in the evening, but nobody could see it because it was located inside the forest. So there was no eyewitness to that incident. Uh, However, these series of destructions are attributed to the UFOs seen in the sky. So we see that in the newspaper, in the channels, in everywhere you find discussions and debates and everything going on, and the media is again coming up with so many speculations, and finally, many of them think that it is perhaps the UFO that has made all these series of destructions. Okay. And Professor Shonku also says that he met the Chinese archaeologist Dr. Sheng while he is in China, and he describes him as a gem of a person, and he is just 40 years old. And he looks younger, and it was he who made arrangements for their stay in Khotan, and he offered all sort of help to join them in their hunt for the UFO. So on that day, they all sit together and plan their strategies regarding how they should plan their expedition and from where they should start and everything. So they decide that they will move on to towards the north, and they will start their expedition from the Taklamakan Desert, which is in the direction of the Tian Shan Mountains. So they decide that they'll start from the Taklamakan desert tomorrow morning. So that is what you find in on that day, 9th October.